Welcome to another episode of Top Lines and Tails, the nation's favourite livestock podcast. And as always, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Harborough, for their continued support. And we're not only sponsored by Harborough, but this week we've got an extra sponsor because we're being sponsored by Pedigree Pro. Yes, Pedigree Pro is a new sheep management software application. So this week we've got another first on Top Lines and Tails because I've got a man who's got his own Wikipedia page, and that makes life a little bit easier for me. Among other accolades, Vice President of the Royal Highland Show, Rob Wainwright. So thanks so much for joining us.
A pleasure to be with you, and very nice to meet you at the Royal Highland Show and to have you rescue me when we couldn't find anywhere to watch the first Lions test until you and your little television in the camper van saved the day.
We'll go on to that in a second. And this is, as my listeners will know, this is a livestock podcast. But Rob, there's more to you than livestock, and I think we'd like to chat a few other subjects, and we will go on to the livestock. I promise you, listener. But for now, let's just go through. Obviously, people will more likely know you as a flanker for Scotland International Rugby, 16 times captain of Scotland, I think. And do people still recognise you on the street from that career? Is that fame still there, Rob?
I kind of yes and no. I don't walk down many streets these days, living on a small island in the Hebrides, so I don't test the theory very often. But I suspect with what I've been doing, the tragedy of the loss of Doddie and the legacy he's left, and my involvement in that has kind of raised my profile a little bit again. But as I say, I don't test the theory very often because I live in the back end of beyond.
Okay, and we'll just go through. Schooled in Glenalmond, studied at Magdalen College, I think, and you're a doctor. You are a doctor, aren't you? An army bursary as a doctor. So that's your career.
I hope the Wikipedia stops there and doesn't concentrate mainly on the fight I had in a pub once.
It does say you've got a blue for boxing. It does say you've got a blue for boxing, so I hope you won that fight.
There's no winners in a pub fight, are there? We were both banned for a month from the Coll Hotel.
Excellent. Excellent. I could edit that out there, Rob, but I don't think I'm going to. And you capped, I think, for Scotland in 1992. Scored your first try against England. Again, I'm picking this up from Wikipedia, and in the Five Nations. But you missed the 1990 Grand Slam, I think. There, you didn't quite. You were a little bit too late for that one, were you? The great Grand Slam of 90.
Doddie and I were unrequited rugby players, Scottish rugby players, because we were neatly sandwiched between in the 10 years between Calcutta Cup wins in 1990 and 2000. So we've for all that we couldn't lose to Ireland in those days, which would be quite welcome now, but we struggled to win against England. In 1994, the first time I played England, when I scored the try, we were winning when I went off injured. Does that count?
I suppose so. And but you played. I mean, some very impressive names. You played alongside John Jeffries, of course. John would be a little bit older than you, maybe, but another farmer our listeners will know from Kelso.
Yes, John. I had to wait for John and Finlay Calder and Derek White to retire before my chance came. But I overlapped, most notably with JJ. We went to the Hong Kong Sevens together. Which is a great place to get to know people on and off the pitch. And so we had a fantastic time over there. But JJ's obviously been heavily involved with rugby as well as being, in terms of the podcast that we're on, a big name in cattle breeding.
Certainly isn't down there in the borders. And you'd taken over the captainship of Scotland from. Would you be sandwiched between Gavin Hastings and maybe Gregor Townsend? Would you'd be the bit in between those two? Would I be right?
Gavin's retirement opened up the door for me, and then Gregor did actually captain one game when I was injured and missed in the middle of my spell. But Gary Armstrong took over in '98 when things were pretty tough, and then '99 obviously. Everything finally came good, and they won the last Five Nations Championship, which is the last silverware we've had, isn't it? From which is incredible when you think of the quality of players we've got today, and it's just we're not quite, we don't quite get the results. But the players we got at the moment, we've got a fantastic backline, particularly.
Definitely, the players are there, and a massive supporter. My wife and I are of the Scotland rugby as well, despite the fact
Yes.
that I am English when it comes to the Calcutta Cup games. And we'll move on from that to 1997 Lions Tour, a monumental tour, I would have to say, with some of the greats on the tour there, Martin Johnson, of course, Neil Back, Lawrence Delalio, Woody, Tom
Yeah.
Smith. You had some absolute legends in that tour, and of course, won the series.
Yeah, it was. In fact, it had a bearing on what we watched last month with the more recent Lions tour. When I came on for the third test, and I actually got the call up for the third test at lunchtime at 1 o'clock for a 5:15 kickoff, so I didn't have a lot of lead in. And I've been kind of off tour for this was the final game. And I knew that I might have an involvement, but I had been out quite late the night before, but not drinking. But so in many respects, it was not an ideal preparation, but I was probably the freshest person on there. And when I look at Andy Farrell's decision making and sticking with the same team for the third test, because they wanted to go for that elusive 3-0 whitewash. I then thought back after the event, actually, he would have been better to have done what we kind of wanted him to do, is give the chance to all the people that had, it was so tight between many of the different players in the positions this year. And had he given it to the people who had not played in the first two tests, they would have been fresher and hungrier and keen to make their point. I just think it was a decision he made for the right reasons, but it probably had the wrong result. And I remembered that because I was so exhausted at the end of the third test. After, a Lions, the attrition you go through on a Lions test is massive. And having the people who are hungry for their first test win actually might have delivered in a way that his sticking with the same team didn't.
Backfired on him a little bit, and we talk about the Lions,
Yeah.
and you kindly mentioned that yes, you did end up in my camper van at the Royal Highland Show to watch that first test, and my wife's asked me to remind you that she had to actually watch the game outside on the phone because there wasn't enough room in the camper for her to be.
I know, and I just feel it felt wrong. There was a bit of space, there were two very comfortable chairs, but yeah, I did feel rather bad.
I think she drew the line at sitting on your lap there, Rob. So anyway, rugby over. You retired at 99, was it when you retired, Rob? And then went.
Kind of late 98, and then watched Scotland do very well in my absence, which was wonderful because they were all my teammates, and so I was really pleased for them. And but yeah, I took a different direction then, and. I've had an amazing 26 years up on the Isle of Coll, where we bought a farm since, and never regretted the decision.
We'll go on to the farming in a second. I just want to go through some of the other stuff that you've done. Then we'll maybe get back to the farming. As you said, you bought well. You could start with telling me why the Isle of Coll, I suppose, in the Hebrides. It's an island that's 13 miles long or something. It's not many people.
Yeah. There was a farm for sale basically that we were looking somewhere up the western seaboard, but we weren't looking for islands, but all that was available that we could afford was an island, and we went over and looked, and it ticked far more boxes than any of the other places that we'd been looking at that we couldn't afford anyway. So we went over there, and bar Calmac, which is the major complication of island life. We've never regretted. It's an amazing community to be part of. It's a beautiful part of the world, and with technology, I can do things like this. You don't have to be places in person, but to a degree, hiding up in the Hebrides protected me from. It was a reason to not live my life on the back of my rugby, but to move on. And I was quite keen, to cut the strings to rugby and get on with a new challenge.
Okay, okay. As I said, we'll go down that challenge in a second. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about your charity work, and congratulations on being awarded an OBE in last year's New Year's Honours List, which is again recognised for the wonderful work that you've done there in the Doddie Aid and the My Name's Doddie Foundation. Let's just have a little bit of a mention about Doddie Weir, your one-time teammate anyway. Doddie Weir, the man,
Yeah,
of course, a farmer as well from Gala Shields, and you knew him quite well. You played together and Lions together. You would have known him better than
yeah.
most.
Yeah, so Doddie and I were teammates, but we also, I think we had a lot in common, and I think you're tied together by the bond of of playing in the teams you've been talking about. Huge honor, and you get a really tight team bond within that. But you don't get on with everyone the same way, and actually having common ground with people. And there were two or three, countrymen that were in the team, and obviously I spent a bit more time with them than the city slickers and people that you just out with rugby had less in common with. But Doddie and I, we probably never spoke about farming hardly when we were playing rugby. But then afterwards, our paths converged. And he lived a long way from me. I didn't see Doddie regularly, but he was one of the players from my past that I always just slotted straight in where we left off. And we both, we like a laugh as well. We share a sense of humor. So uh, I, I was always close to him. And then obviously this tragedy of his diagnosis and how he faced up, and how inspiring he was in the way he said, right, let's do something about this. So I signed up to join that crusade with him.
Okay, and that's obviously that crusade while you're still alive. But you said you like to laugh. He did some sort of fairly outlandish things. I remember seeing him climbing the pole at the Royal Highland Show, racing up the pole with the axe and carrying weights up Ben Nevis, and he liked a bit of mischief too, I think.
Oh, without a doubt, him and Gary Armstrong were extremely close, and they obviously lived locally. And Gary was a huge support to Doddie and still is, I think, to the family. And yeah, they were extremely mischievous, even more mischievous than I am, certainly.
And we'll talk about the foundation. Obviously, as I said, Doddie started that himself, I believe, obviously with people around him when he knew he was diagnosed with motor neurone disease and sadly died in 2022. But you've had very much a high-profile front end in that with the Doddie Aid and the My Name's Doddie and done a lot of things with it as well. And were you there right at the beginning there with him, as you said?
Uh, I think one of my other Lions colleagues, who again I've stayed close with, Paul Wallace, was the first person that intimated to me that all might not be right with Doddie. And I remember meeting him and the whole family down in London for a Calcutta Cup, which was odd to have the whole family down. And I kind of maybe I should have read the signs then. But as I said, once he declared his hand and said we're going to do something about it, I think anyone would see the opportunity, and certainly I did, for a chance to defeat a horrible disease when you have someone as charismatic as Doddie, he gave so much time. He was very giving of his time. He's a very sociable person, and he liked to interact with people. So he touched so many people briefly, but and it left a strong mark on so many people because of how sociable he was, and he was obviously in the trade. He was there at hospitality events, looking after some of the streets at Murrayfield, and so he'd met an awful lot of people. And to have that loyalty, to harness that loyalty, has made it's been a really pleasurable, and satisfying job for me because Doddie's created all the loyalty. I just put some frameworks in place for people to fundraise.
Okay.
And yeah, it's been a very satisfying process for me. And I suppose the one thing we haven't got yet is any real big time progress in treating the disease, sadly, but we're getting there.
Certainly, and I've from memory, I think was it not close on 2 million was raised before he died, and that's now gone up to 5 or 6 million and more probably that's gone into the research on this.
It's way more than that. Way more than that. It's up. It's the foundation don't like to talk about money raised. They like to talk about money spent on on research and support for MND sufferers, but primarily research is their raison d'etre to find, solutions to the disease. And I think they're up at 20 million now.
Okay.
It's been hugely successful. And Doddie may be 2 to 3 years gone, but his, his reach is still there. He still opens doors, and the fundraising goes on, and it's a great model.
It's brilliant. And the stuff that you have done, I know you sent me a video yesterday of you cycling up Glen Shee, which as a doctor, at 60 years old, you probably should know better, but doing a lot of those cycle rides and things and getting a lot of people around you to come and do that. And it becomes a team fundraiser then when you get a lot of people all joining together on these cycle rides.
Yeah, it's all I don't do the fundraising. I just put the structure in place. Or it isn't an I thing; it's a we thing. I have a team. Ian Fraser, who's been a neighbour on Coll, who's been there, helping me with the social media stuff, has been important. And now we've got a couple of employees from the foundation as well, in Mia and Finley particularly, that help us with a lot of these things. And one thing I think that I've learned, particularly through what I've just discussed with Doddie, how the marquee's left on this thing that's called the rugby community, but I kind of think of it now as the rugby family, because I've been so impressed with how they, people who've never, are miles away from Doddie. We'll be cycling through a club down in southwest Wales, and I'll say, can we stop in? There's only 400 of us. Could we have a bite to eat? And maybe some people sleep on your floor, and they just do it. They don't ask for recompense. And it has been very, very uplifting that the rugby community and the agricultural community, they're both the same. And the loyalty they show to their icons in Doddie, it's just staggering, the doors that open and the generosity that we come across.
I certainly know a few people have been on those rides. I know Tim Russell, quite well. Moira and her sisters did that ride down there, and there's been 2 or 3 others that I know within the community that have done this thing, and a fantastic thing it is. And you've got another one coming up, and we'll maybe plug that in a minute or when we get towards
obviously, I'm hoping Moira and her sister and the other girls are going to ride in this next one. Okay. So there we go. The pressure's on.
You heard it here first, Moira. There we go.
And Tim, we're going to need another dinner at Stirling, another amazing fundraising dinners.
That was a fantastic event, and Tim driving the car with a piece of alkaline pipe out of the window, making the girls go faster as they rode up the road. Marvelous memories, I think. Other things, of course, have been done as well. Not just the cycling, a wheelchair push, I think it was this year. And tell us about this Doddie disco going on, and that's actually back in your hometown. What's going on there?
It's during lockdown when we were doing Doddie Aid. And we used to we had some really wacky things. It seems so long ago, lockdown now, and we've moved back to normal life. But you could be very creative in how we use the sort of media that we're on now. And we used to have, podcasts, the Doddcast, and there was this call for. I'd said maybe we need to have Doddie Fest on Coll. And anyway, a lot of people had said, "Come on, we must do Doddie Fest." So in the end, we do Doddie's Disco Fest, and maybe I think we should probably drop the disco bit because that scares people off. It's just it's a great gathering. We've got OJ Borge, Radio 2 DJ, came up last year, absolutely loved it. So he's coming up again as key DJ, and it's just a dance in a village hall in the Highlands and Islands, which happens all the time. But this is, the music's a wee bit different from what people are used to in West Coast village halls.
But a fundraiser again, of course. Let's just talk about the Isle of Coll. I said you've been there. You said yourself 26 years there. The Isle of Coll, west of Mull. For those of my American listeners, don't even know where Scotland is, but west of the Isle of Mull, just north of Tiree. There, a couple of hours on a boat. Population of less than 200. Am I right in thinking? And about
it's varied. We've had our baby boom when we arrived with 4 kids. That was. Obviously increased the school roll pretty significantly, and then it was quite a backwater back then, and property prices were quite cheap, so we had a lot of young people buying in, and the school roll went huge for a while. I think we had about 34 kids in the primary school, which for a population of 240 was a great demographic to have. And then secondary school came along. There is no secondary school on Coll, so a lot of these families moved away with their kids, and we're just hopefully coming out of a real downturn in the breeding population. But a lot of the baby boomers that were born back in those days, they're beginning to come back and starting to breed. So our demographic is hopefully improving again. But yeah, we peaked at 240 about 15, 20 years ago, and we're now down to about 165, 170.
Okay, I was looking at the history, and the Kolaks, I think they're called a friendly race of people by all accounts, but used to be 1,400 of them back in the Vikings days. So they've certainly lots of McLeans, I think.
Than that, I think just when the tatty famine came in the mid 19th century, I think we were at that. I think that's when it peaked, and the farm is covered in shearlings in the most inhospitable places out on boggy moorland, and God, it must have been a tough life in those days. But the amount of work they did bringing kelp and sand from down on the beaches up and improving the ground has left a legacy for you have these little green patches out on what is otherwise a very acid moor.
Okay, and it certainly looks very beautiful of the pictures that I've seen, and the beaches and the rest of that brings a lot of tourists in, I guess. But yes, I did notice the sand there, that you utilize the sand back in around the steading and around the fields as well. And how does that work?
Yeah, we bed on sand, because getting straw in at 240 pounds a ton just doesn't make sense, really. We have to bring a bit in, but we don't have a lot of cattle indoors anyway. We operate on a deferred grazing system through the winter, so we don't need a lot. But it's an amazing thing to have. And then when you spread it on the more acid fields, obviously you're liming as well as fertilizing. So we've got rid of, or we've thinned down the amount of machinery we've got, but the new muck spreader, rear discharge muck spreader, has pride of place and is a really important part of our armory.
Okay, and that seems to be very much in a lot of cases that we are going back to those sort of earlier ways and doing away with the chemicals and the fertilizer.
Yeah.
And you say that you're there with your wife, Romain, and your family as well. How big is the farm to support a family? Or I don't know how many of you there are, to be fair.
Well, there's 4 kids. All of them, to a greater or lesser degree, are home. 3 of them are full-time home, and my eldest son works on polar expedition cruises, and has a bit of a dream existence. But he's in the Northwest Passage, which which was being closed for centuries, and now he's in there at the moment. But when he's not on there, and he's 50% on, 50% off, he's back at home, and then my other 2 sons and my daughter are all on island. So it's fantastic to have them back, and I think it reflects very well on how much the island is meant to them, having been brought up there. It may be that we were quite selfish taking our kids there, but I thought the pros would outweigh the cons, and it's gratifying to have your children confirm that by coming home.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just going on to the farm there, I think I read somewhere that Coll is about 18,000 acres, but I mean they wouldn't all be farmable acres. But I mean, have you got a fair chunk of that, or do you guys just share land, or how does it work on these islands?
No, we declare on our IACs about 4,500 acres, but a lot of it is way out in the back and beyond, and has been minimally utilized, the hill. But with what we're moving into now, how we're building the system we're in, particularly with the use of virtual fencing, we're hoping that we're going to be able to get cattle out to all corners of the farm in the future, whereas we've been limited to the stuff that's more accessible over the last 25 years. But it's an interesting mix. The pH goes from 9 to 4 in about 300-400 yards. So we go from this incredibly fertile maca ground, shell sand based, high calcium, high pH, to blanket peat bog in a very short time. And obviously if you mix sand and peat, you've got pretty much the perfect growing medium. So there's a wee strip of really good ground between. But it's an interesting place to farm.
Okay, and let's just talk about we are a livestock podcast. Let's talk about the livestock. I noted on video I saw of you doing there of the farm, which is great to see that. Oh, with Ling cows, and of course Ling is very much suited to that west coast, or
Yeah, yeah,
developed on the west coast down a few islands down from you, and are very much suited there. Is that the backbone of your herd?
yeah. We've come into farming, completely fresh. And we start off with, buying blue greys in. You can't, replicate blue greys. So I remember being told we should try the Ling, and I was resistant for a while, but it's become, the mainstay of our breeding. And we use terminal size and cross out, and there's a lot we could do to improve our animals. But my ethos is very much one of a maternal breed that can produce a half decent calf off some pretty difficult terrain with minimum wintering costs, and the Ling is doing a great job for us.
When you say the terminal sire, I mean you use a Ling sire back on the board. Terminal sires have you been using that? I don't think it's Charolais country, is
Yeah,
it quite out there?
yeah, well, it is. I remember when I was advised by Willie Porter over at Scrine in Angus, who also had Hillground, and he put me onto the Blue Greys when I started. And when we got going, we came with almost zero knowledge, and hugely grateful for all the advice that we found the agricultural community very generous with its advice, albeit everyone had their loyalties, in terms of breed, etc. But we started off with the blue grey and then moved into the Ling. And in terms of what we crossed them with, we produced Simling crosses. Obviously, we then get a slightly more valuable bullock off it, and then we have heifers that people want to buy.
Okay.
But we actually, we're going back to Willie Porter. He said he didn't think that Charolais would do on this ground. And I'm sorry, Willie. I'm trying to prove you wrong. And we were very reluctant to go to Charolais because we just they calf outside. We can't have any calving problems. We have no vet on the island, so everything has to be very simple. But Ali Houston of Gretna House, the late great Ali Houston, was saying, you must try my new. I've been trying to breed them easy care and easy carving, and I was resistant, and then eventually I cracked and I got one of his bulls, and I have to say it has done what he said it would, and it's a great legacy for a man who was huge in terms of livestock within Scotland, I think.
Phenomenal breeder, phenomenal man. You're right, indeed,
Yes.
and a sad loss to the industry. And of course, a great breeder was Simmentals as well as Charolais Alistair was. And that's interesting to know that when I know the Charolais, we've talked to a lot of Charolais breeders on this podcast, and they have definitely made those strides into easier carving and what have you. That's interesting to know that they're breeding a bull that will survive it in the conditions that you're talking about. And the conditions you mentioned just now, the geofencing, I'm not quite sure exactly how the geofencing works, but it seems that it's working for you and working well, I think.
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, we're moving into. I don't like labels, but I think it's fair to say we're heading into the mob grazing regenerative model, and we've been persuaded by the faith that's been shown with the people advising us in it that they're taking all the risk in terms of they say that this is going to fix carbon in your soil, it's going to make you more profitable, and we will cover all the costs to prove it to you. And that's quite a persuasive argument when people are prepared to pay up front for something. So we're moving into a mob stocking system, which most people who do it with electric fences, which is a little bit of work, but with electric collars, with the virtual fencing, we use Mono, a Norwegian company. They've been fantastic to work with, and they had an emerging bit of hardware and software, and it's getting better and better. But literally, I'm sitting in Pennycook at the moment. And I'm able to move the cattle on my phone in about a minute. I can move them on to the next bit, and it's just it's a really exciting time for me. My middle boy Alex is in on the farm. He's quite fundamentalist about it. He's really bought into it, and we're constantly, I'm having to put the health of the and welfare of the animals ahead of the soil and the grazing system that he's pushing. But it's a very exciting time for us, and we're really enjoying farming and just looking at what we're leaving behind with this system. We're definitely improving the quality of the pasture.
Well, improving the quality, a revolution, I would actually say, good as far as to say for ground like that, but also you're improving your profitability as well. I would guess that goes without saying.
Yeah, the thing with regenerative farming is minimum inputs, and we've always been a low input farm. And when I said, other people are putting their money in, this is a carbon sequestration scheme. I didn't think that we'd be able to change things and fix a lot of carbon on our in-by soil, but they say they believed in it so much that they funded the whole thing up front, and that's through Regenerate Outcomes Fund, and we get advice from Understanding Ag, which is the organization that Gabe Brown has set up. He was obviously the kind of father of the regenerative farming movement, and there's a lot of stuff in there that takes a bit of getting used to and kind of puts off. It has the potential to put farmers off, but the basic, the bottom line is put in less, get out more, and I think anyone that runs a business can see the merits of that.
Indeed, and you talk about the cattle there. You've got to have sheep. Everybody's got sheep. You have to have sheep to clear behind the cattle. Do you keep a lot of sheep, and do they make you happy?
Sheep don't make me as happy as cows do, and we have to use electric fencing for the sheep within the system. And the word system, I think, is worth pointing out here. The system side of thing. We've evolved a system, and we've moved through a number of breeds to Chlin as our maternal. And then we crossed a lot into the Charolais. We were crossing to the Charolais and the Texel, but we've now decided that the Texel has now got all the things that we were looking for, a bit more length. That the Charolais was giving us, and the Charolais is a bit soft when it's first born. So we're really crossing half of them to the Texel, and the rest are going pure.
That's interesting. Interesting that the clean is ousting what would have been home to the Hebrideans going back many years, and I've had a few Hebrideans. They're hard. You can't kill them if you try. They're hard as nails. But the clean coming in and taking on that role with a much better animal.
Well, it was mainly blackies. When we got there, we very quickly went to Cheviots because the white face was, 20 pounds more in the lamb. That's such a lie. When I started, we didn't get 20 pounds for a lamb, and one of the great satisfactions of livestock farming at the moment is we're beginning to get the prices we need. Mm-hmm. And I think when we started off in foot and mouth, there was an intervention for your lambs, and I think it was either £5 or £10 a lamb, and here we are now averaging, £100 for our lambs, which is fantastic.
It's almost like a culmination of all the things starting 26 years ago that it's come right. And as you said, the finance side of farming at the moment, or the livestock farming, or the cost of food to the consumer, maybe is probably the right word, is starting to improve to a level where farming can be sustainable and sustain a family too, which is brilliant to hear.
And we were, let's be honest, the brown envelope is still a significant part of our income. But, when I started, the brown envelope was way up there, sort of 80+% of our income. And now subsidies are down, down below 50% probably, because we're getting some return on our livestock. And it's been fantastic. And you mentioned the Hebrideans. We started with some Hebrideans as well, and we still keep quite a lot of sheep that are black, because the great thing about the Hebridean is almost on every metric it's brilliant, except for the most important one, that's the carcass. And but we've kept the breeding that is still in our sheep now. We have a lot of black sheep. They've got a tiny bit of Hebridean in them, and the maternal benefits. I was getting rid of the black sheep, and then I found out that actually, once we started recording what they were doing, the black ones were doing better than the white ones. So
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, and as you said, they're hardy wee things that'll live forever as well if you can keep them in.
yeah,
And I see sort of video. You got your cows down on the beach, and it all looks idyllic. But you mentioned just now no vet on the island. There, do you cover that?
yeah.
You're a doctor, of course. Do you cover the vet's role for other people and yourself, or is it
I,
just
I, I think it's important to say I was a doctor.
okay?
So,
Okay.
and I haven't been for, yeah, 20, 30 years probably. But yeah, there is no vet. And actually, as of yesterday, there literally is no vet because our vet practice all through our time has been based on Tyree, but Anne, who's been a fantastic vet for us, has just retired literally on the 1st of September, and we have no vet at the moment. But we never had a vet on site, and I think it's an interesting study in how in the different ends of agriculture when you have Tyree that had the vet 24/7 vet available and what the systems that they built and the breeds they're using when you had a vet and then the difference between what we've had to do on call where there is no vet. So there's no cesareans, there's no bringing up the vet, can you come and sort it out? You have to build resilient systems that look after themselves, which I think is a really good thing for livestock breeding. I think we've looked after our livestock far too well and made it. Let's not call it soft. Jim Telfer would have called it soft, but it's lost the ability to do the job that it should do on its own, and I think that's a really important thing that needs to be. It's not all about how big the arse is. It's about will it produce a live calf unaided year after year, and yeah, productivity over 10 years. I remember hearing that I think it takes four calves until your cow pays off itself was the figure, and that's an important thing to consider if you think your first four calves are just paying off the cost of the heifer, and then if you're getting six more calves after, then you're in profit. If you're only getting two or three more calves, then actually your bottom line may not be really healthy.
Yeah, longevity is a huge issue,
Yeah,
a huge thing again. Now, and you mentioned the vet on call. If I remember right, Boyd rings a bell.
yeah,
Our Pat Boyd, our older listeners will remember that he actually bred a Royal Smithfield Show winner for Ewan McPherson going back into the 80s. So that's so
yeah.
some good animals there on call, and some good other things on call as well. There's a distillery there, I believe. It's quite good. I'm sure you've sampled them.
Coll and Tyree have both got micro distilleries, and the Tyree one is slightly less micro than ours. They do whiskey and gin. We do gin, rum, vodka, and it all comes out of a shed. But it's a wonderful thing to have on the island, and a very good product. I'd recommend the Gorse gin from Coll. Absolutely delicious.
I love the name. I love the name Twisted Highlander. I think that
Yes.
I can very much see that.
We had a Highland cow that lived near the village for many years, for about 20 years, and it had one horn up and one down, and it's become the kind of trademark of Coll now, the Twisted Highlander.
Oh wow, okay, that's where that comes from. Let's just move on to a few of your other things there. I know you're a busy man, and I appreciate your time on this one. But you're a busy man. You do get involved in other things as well. The Risabi, I will mention maybe the Highland Show in a minute, but Risabi and Farmstrong and Farmstrong. John Scott's a good friend of mine, good friend of the podcast here as well. I was invited to go on his Blether Together podcast, and I heard that you'd been on that one as well. I mean, two good outfits there, and very necessary, and also very very close, I suppose, to the life of an islander.
Yeah, and I suppose one of the things that I take for granted to a degree is I'm part of three very strong communities. One is the agricultural community, the other is the rugby community, and then I have my island, the local community on Coll. And they're all very strong communities, and community works in both ways. You give and you take. And when you need help, there's people to turn to, and sadly, that's not the case for everyone everywhere. And I very much work off the Crocodile Dundee, form of mental health support. If I have a problem, I go down the pub and I tell Wally, and he tells everyone else, and then it's not my problem; it's everyone's problem. And yeah, I don't necessarily believe in it in that form, but being able to go down to the Coll Hotel, we've got a fantastic pub on Coll, and just talk things over with your mates is great. But I understand, that isn't available to everyone, and Farmstrong and Wasabi have both doing great stuff, and I'm on the an in-person blether together in a few days' time up in Fort William. So we very much looking forward to seeing. And John Scott's coming to stay with us in a week's time, and it's great to have him over. The expertise he have, he's so much further down the journey of producing sustainable livestock than I am, and
Great. Great farm, great farmer. Terrible golfer though. Don't well, take him on at golf by all means, because I played with John a few times when I've been up that way. And the Royal Highland Show, we've got to mention. Obviously, you've been like the rest of us, been going to the Highland Show since you were a boy, and then to end up being vice president. Does that mean you're going to take over as gaffer fairly soon?
No, it's the president. It's an interesting bit of history on the Highland Show. The Highland Show used to be peripatetic; it would move around the regions, and I think there are 8 regions in Scotland, and it used to move from region to region. Then it found its home in Ingliston, and as a result, now the presidency is a 1-year gig, and it moves around the region. So. We are the most northwesterly point of of Strathclyde region, as was back in the sort of 70s when we went regions. So I was honoured to be asked, and my involvement's been slightly curtailed by being so far away and can't just come down at the drop of a hat. But it's been a fantastic team that's been led by George Lyon and the girls. That have done a lot of the legwork have been absolutely fantastic, and it's a 1-year gig. I was really honoured to be involved. I hope we set a good benchmark on what could be achieved in terms of promoting the industry, looking at some of the challenges and finding solutions, which was the main theme of the tent at the Highland Show, and raising money for the charities, 2 of whom we've just discussed in Farmstrong and Wasabi, that support people in need within the farming community.
Of course, indeed. And the great President's Dinner, I know, raised a lot there. And you've got Jim Logan there as a chairman, and Kay Adam about to take over as well. I think so. Some very, very good farmers in and amongst the organisation, and a new CEO, I believe, as well. So let's just maybe wrap this up a little bit with what's going on now with the Doddie Aid and with what's coming up there. Because, as you said, the next ride tends to revolve around the Six Nations, if I'm right in thinking. So where do we go? Where do people apply? And how can we just put an advert out there to get some people jumping on their bikes with you, Rob?
Well, there's 2 things we do. I'm less involved with Doddie Aid, which is 5 weeks of exercise to get rid of the Christmas surplus from the 1st of January through until the start of the Six Nations. So I'd urge people to get involved, and the farming community have been stalwarts of that over the years it's been going on. And then for those who like a bigger challenge, we're doing Doddie's Triple Crown, which is Melrose to Leeds to Gloucester to Fishguard, a ferry over to Ireland, then up the east coast of Ireland to Dublin. Saying 700 miles in 4 days, cycling or running if you want to. Some people are running marathons on the route. It sounds very daunting, but in team relay, it's eminently doable, as Tim Russell will bear testament, and his not to belittle how fit his girls were, they were fantastic, but it's eminently achievable for any level of cyclist. And Andy, obviously, I'm not sure where you stand on getting on your bike. Obviously, you're under a bit of pressure now, having raised it on your podcast.
I'd have to cycle there from France. I do have a son who's very keen on cycling, and I will see if I can get him to divvy up a team, because he's done a couple of 100 miles doing east to the west on chasing the sunrise before. So I'll get him involved. And you mentioned the girls that cycled the one before. I was actually there when they came in, and Catherine Moira came came in and took their clothes off, went and sort of changed their clothes in the street, and then went and sat and watched the rugby and went to the pub, looked like they'd never been anywhere. So they were
Yeah.
fit because that was the three.
No, they did really well, and it's a great model. It's for me, it's all about community fundraising, and we just put a framework for people to fundraise, and whenever people join, they say, yeah, I think I may, I will be able to get a team together. I think we'll be able to do the actual challenge. In terms of the fundraising, we tell people that the average team raises in advance of 25,000, and that kind of puts people off because most people don't think that they'll manage that, and then they all manage it and beyond. If you think of the girls' team we're talking about there, they raised about 99,000, I think.
Wow. I know the dinner raised 25 on its own, I seem to remember.
Yeah, they blew it out of the water. And even we had a team of girls from Coll that ran in parallel with us last year, and were kind of opening up the running side of things. And they were very skeptical about being able to, raise 10,000, let alone what they raised, which I think was 27,000. And it is, and it's this money, there's no costs in this. It goes boom straight into funding research at MyNamesDoddie Foundation and trying to find a solution to this disease that, the treatment really hasn't changed in about 20 years, which is a tragedy that we hoped we would find solutions in time to help Doddie. That's not been the case, but I don't get too depressed about it. I see a roadmap now. If we need two things, and the research is working on that. That is a quick diagnosis. If we can very, very quickly find out what people have got instead of having to rule out everything else and saying, well, there's nothing left that could cause it bar MND. If there was a biomarker that we could just do the test, you've got MND. And if we could then find some drugs through repurposing drug trials and find a drug that slows down progression, we can stop people when they've got a little bit of clawing of the hand instead of when they can't speak and they're in wheelchairs and then the full horror of the disease. So that's the way I build up my hope for the future in the disease, and anyone that wants to take part. It's a really uplifting event. The stops at the clubs are just amazing, and the interaction with the other people cycling, but also with the people that look after us on the way is wonderful. And it's, as a physical challenge, if you're trying to do the whole lot, yes, that's a crazy challenge. But if you're doing it in relay, rolling relay with other people, it's eminently doable. So don't be scared. Just get signed up. It's a wonderful way to spend the middle week of March, and it's just before lambing, I hope, for most people. Certainly up in our neck of the woods. I know there's a few folk who have early lambing as an excuse for not making it, and I understand that. But we're heading to Dublin for Super Saturday, and it'll be an amazing weekend. Guinness are hosting us. We'll be in the storehouse in the centre of Dublin, which will be fantastic.
I might make that bit, Rob. I might make that bit. But, well, I am lambing, obviously, in February of myself. No, well, that's absolutely brilliant, Rob. Commendable. It's great to have you on, but commendable just how much you've done and still doing for MND. And people, my listeners, can hear now. And please, anybody, please put your hand up and take part, or put your hand in your pocket and contribute. But it's not something that you've just started. It's something you're still very much involved in and very much going forward with. And I think that's the whole thing is with these charity things, is to be able to keep driving on and keep the enthusiasm going.
No, and it's it only happens because people come and take part. And if people are interested, I think it's Rob's Ride at mynamesdoddie.co.uk. But get in touch with the foundation and ask, and Mia at MyNamesDoddie will also get you through to Mia, Mia and Finlay have been absolutely fantastic. They've taken all the pressure off me by doing most of the organisation. So
excellent. I'll put that information up on our Facebook page.
That'd be fantastic.
One last thing, I'd just like to wish the Scottish girls best of luck in the Women's Rugby World Cup, which seems to be gathering a bit of ground, and a great team they are. But I fear they've got Canada tonight, or tomorrow night rather, might just put them in a little bit of jeopardy.
Well, they're certainly on a run, and I think for all of us that have watched the development of women's rugby, how it has advanced in really a short time, the last 5 years even, it's been staggering, and it's wonderful to to see it. It's a really entertaining, almost more entertaining than men's rugby. Men's rugby is getting a bit stodgy and generic in some, a lot of the game, but you get far more free flowing rugby with the ladies' game, and the girls have done so well. I know it's great that Canada are such a strong ladies' team, but let's hopefully we can put them in their place.
Hopefully so. Rob, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on Top Lines and Tails and to chat with you very honestly. And I appreciate you, as I said, giving up your busy time. And everybody, I think, on here appreciates what you've done. And one of these days, I'll make it over to Coll. I've been looking at doing a bit of research, and it looks gorgeous on that island there. So I'll maybe come over and catch a pint with you in the Coll Hotel.
Yeah, you can come and show us some of your disco moves.
There we go. My dad dancing days are over, I think. Rob, thanks again for your time.
That's a pleasure. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Top Lines and Tails podcast. And don't forget, we are sponsored in partnership with Harborough. Harborough are currently having an offer running on buckets and blocks you might need now and right through the winter. Get stocked up and take the worry away from your winter with everything from super popular feet and fertility pre-tupping buckets to triple mag buckets for suckler cows and feed blocks to keep hill ewes going all winter long. So get in touch for a good deal now at your Harborough representative or down at your local Harborough store. And I mentioned earlier on that this week we are also sponsored by Pedigree Pro. And Pedigree Pro is a small sheep management system launched by myself and a few colleagues. It's out there, it's free, available to use there at pedigreepro.app. That's pedigreepro.app, app. And you can just sign in there and see what Pedigree Pro does for you. It's free up to 20 sheep, and then after that, it's a small subscription. So there's Pedigree Pro. So thanks very much again to Harborough, our main sponsors, and our sponsors long-term with the Top Lines and Tails podcast. And look Harborough up on the internet, look everything up on the internet for that matter, and also don't forget to look at our Top Lines and Tails Facebook community, Facebook group there. You can join in and find some information to back up this and previous episodes.